D.B. Cooper, the only man who hijacked a plane and vanished forever. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It was the afternoon of November 24th, 1971. A man in his mid-40s, dressed in a black suit and dark sunglasses, boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He carried a black attaché case and a calm demeanor. The name on his ticket, Dan Cooper. Later, the world would know him as D.B. Cooper. The flight was bound for Seattle, a short, 30-minute hop. There were 36 passengers, 6 crew members, and no one suspected that within minutes, the man in seat 18C would change aviation history forever. Flight 305 took off at 2:50 p.m. The man lit a cigarette. He ordered a bourbon and soda. Smooth, quiet, ordinary. Then he handed a note to the flight attendant. She thought it was just another businessman hitting on her. She tucked it into her purse. But the man leaned closer. "Miss," he said, "you'd better read that. I have a bomb." Her hands trembled. She opened the note. The message was simple, direct. He claimed he had a bomb and demanded $200,000 in cash for parachutes and a fuel truck ready in Seattle. If not, he would blow the plane to pieces. She rushed to the cockpit. The pilot, William Scott, was stunned. But there was no time for disbelief. They had a crisis mid-air. Seattle Air Traffic Control was notified. The FBI got the call. Back in the cabin, Cooper opened his briefcase for the flight attendant. Inside, red cylinders, wires, a battery. It looked like a bomb. Whether it was real, no one knew. No one dared to find out. The pilot circled Seattle for 2 hours as authorities scrambled to gather the cash and parachutes. Cooper was calm, polite. He let the passengers believe it was just a delay. He even paid for his drink. At 5:24 p.m., the plane landed in Seattle. The passengers were released. Cooper's demands were met. Bags of marked bills and parachutes were brought aboard. Only the flight crew remained. Then he gave new instructions. He wanted to fly to Mexico City. He demanded a low altitude, 10,000 feet. The rear staircase must remain down. He wanted the plane to fly slowly. He even specified the wing flaps. The pilots followed his orders. They took off again at 7:40 p.m., heading south, somewhere over the thick forests of Washington. With storm clouds rolling in and freezing wind rushing through the open stairwell, D.B. Cooper did the unthinkable. He jumped, wearing a business suit, parachute, and carrying $200,000 in cash strapped to his body. He vanished into the darkness. When the plane landed in Reno hours later, he was gone. No one saw him jump. No one knew where he landed. The FBI launched the largest manhunt in U.S. history. But Cooper had disappeared, completely. No body, no parachute, no trace. The legend was born. In the weeks that followed, tips poured in. Every conman, veteran, and skydiver with a mysterious past became a suspect. But no arrest, no closure. The name D.B. Cooper came from a press mix-up. A man named D.B. Cooper in Oregon was wrongly identified. The name stuck, and so did the myth. For years, the FBI chased leads. In 1980, a boy found $5,800 in decaying $20 bills buried near the Columbia River, part of Cooper's ransom. But the man himself? Still a ghost. Who was he? Where did he go? Did he survive? And why did he do it? The answers remain buried in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. But this was only the beginning. In the next chapter, the investigation intensifies. Suspects emerge, and a strange twist years later brings new hope and new mystery. November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve. Passengers at Portland International Airport hurried through the terminal. Among them was a quiet man in his mid-40s. Dressed in a black suit, white shirt, black tie, and sunglasses, he looked like a businessman. But his suitcase didn't hold papers. It held a bomb. He used the name Dan Cooper on his ticket. Cost $20. The destination? Seattle. Flight 305. A short trip. Just 30 minutes in the air. But everything was about to change. At 2:50 p.m., Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 took off. The Boeing 727 had 36 passengers and 6 crew members. The skies were cloudy, but the flight was smooth. Soon after takeoff, Cooper pressed the button above his seat. A flight attendant named Florence Schaffner approached. He handed her a note. She assumed it was a phone number or business pitch. She slipped it into her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned closer. "Miss," he whispered, "you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner's heart skipped. She opened the note. It was typed. Cooper claimed he had a bomb. He wanted her to sit beside him. Trembling, she obeyed. Cooper opened his briefcase just enough for her to peek inside. Red sticks, wires, batteries. It looked real. He then dictated his demands. $200,000 in cash. For parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve. A fuel truck ready in Seattle to refuel the plane. "No tricks," he warned. "No funny business, or everyone dies." Schaffner carried the message to the cockpit. Captain William Scott didn't panic. He calmly contacted air traffic control. The FBI was alerted. Cooper sipped bourbon and smoked a cigarette. He stayed calm, polite even. He let the passengers believe nothing was wrong. The plane circled in the sky, buying time. On the ground, the FBI scrambled. Agents raced to gather the ransom. The money came from several Seattle banks. Each bill was photographed, marked, serial numbers recorded. The parachutes proved more difficult. At first, authorities brought military-grade gear, but Cooper refused. He wanted civilian chutes. He feared being tricked. Meanwhile, passengers noticed nothing unusual. The crew served drinks. Cooper chatted with the attendants. He even paid for his drinks. Offered one to a flight attendant. "I don't have a grudge against your airline," he said. "It's just about the money." By 5:24 p.m., the plane began its descent. The ransom and parachutes were waiting in Seattle. Police and FBI surrounded the airport, but they stayed hidden. Cooper insisted no cops near the plane. Once landed, Cooper kept the passengers on board. He waited until the money and parachutes were delivered. A flight attendant carried the items on board. Then Cooper released the 36 passengers. Only the crew remained. Outside, night fell. Rain poured, but Cooper wasn't done. He told the pilots his next destination, Mexico City. He had more instructions. The plane must fly low, below 10,000 feet. Landing gear down. Flaps set to 15 degrees. Cabin unpressurized. Why? No one knew, but the crew obeyed. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off again, into darkness. Somewhere over southwestern Washington, between 8 o'clock and 8:13 p.m., a light blinked in the cockpit. The aft staircase had been lowered. The plane jolted. Wind rushed in. Cooper was gone. He had jumped into the storm, parachute on, money strapped to his chest. No one saw it happen. By the time the plane landed safely in Reno, Nevada, he was long gone. Gone into history, into myth, gone forever, or so it seemed. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It was November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve. Seattle's airport was buzzing, but not unusually so. Travelers carried gifts and suitcases. Airport workers moved with calm efficiency. Nobody knew history was about to take flight. Northwest Orient Flight 305 was a standard Boeing 727, scheduled to fly from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. A 30-minute hop, just another regional trip for the crew and the 36 passengers on board. A middle-aged man wearing a dark suit, a white shirt, and a black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie pin walked up to the counter. He carried a black attaché case. His ticket was purchased with cash, $20 for a one-way trip. The name on the ticket, Dan Cooper. Nothing about him stood out except how ordinary he looked. Calm, polite, slightly reserved. He wore sunglasses indoors. No one questioned it. It was the 70s. Styles were stranger. At exactly 2:50 p.m., Flight 305 lifted off the runway in Portland. The sky was overcast, the winds mild. The cabin crew began their routine drinks, snacks, friendly greetings. About 10 minutes into the flight, a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner was making her way through the aisle. Cooper reached into his jacket and handed her a note. She barely looked at it. Flight attendants were used to notes from lonely businessmen or overzealous passengers. She slipped it into her pocket and continued on. Cooper leaned closer. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner froze. She pulled out the note and read it. In neat block letters, it said, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me. You are being hijacked." She sat down. Cooper opened the attaché case slightly to show her a glimpse of wires, red sticks, and what looked like a battery pack. Enough to convince anyone it was real. Calmly, he dictated his demands: $200,000 in cash, in negotiable American currency. For parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve. A fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane for a getaway. The instructions were clear. No funny business. Schaffner walked to the cockpit. She relayed the demands to the pilots. Captain William Scott didn't panic. He radioed the control tower. Within minutes, the FBI was notified. Air traffic control told the pilots to circle over Puget Sound to give authorities time to gather the ransom and the parachutes. Cooper sat quietly in seat 18C. He sipped bourbon and smoked cigarettes, Raleighs. He spoke little, but when he did, he was courteous, even gentle. He paid for his drink. He was not nervous, not agitated. The plane circled for nearly 2 hours. Passengers began to get suspicious, but the crew remained calm. They were told there was a minor mechanical issue and they'd land shortly. Nobody knew a hijacking was in progress. On the ground, the FBI scrambled to meet Cooper's demands. They gathered $200,000 in marked, used $20 bills. They collected 4 parachutes, 2 civilian and 2 military grade. At 5:39 p.m., over 2 hours after takeoff, Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. It was raining. The sun was setting. The plane taxied to a remote part of the runway, far from the main terminal. FBI agents, police, and emergency crews were stationed at a safe distance. The cabin lights dimmed. The window shades were lowered to prevent snipers from getting a clear view inside. A Northwest Orient employee, dressed in street clothes to avoid suspicion, approached the plane. He handed over the money and parachutes. Cooper inspected them. No tricks. He then released the 36 passengers. Everyone except 4 crew members was allowed to leave. He even let Schaffner go. He kept the flight crew: Captain Scott, co-pilot William Radizak, flight engineer Harold Anderson, and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow. Cooper gave specific flight instructions: fly south toward Mexico City. Maintain an altitude of 10,000 feet. Keep the landing gear down. Flaps at 15 degrees. Fly slow, no more than 200 knots. He insisted the rear stairway remain lowered during takeoff. The pilots protested. That was dangerous. Cooper didn't budge. He knew what he was doing. That plane, the Boeing 727, had a unique feature: a rear air stair that could be lowered mid-flight. He intended to use it. Fuel trucks rolled up. The plane was filled. The weather was getting worse, windy, stormy, dark. Still, Cooper insisted they take off. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 lifted off again, heading south. Less than 30 minutes later, somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington, the rear stairway opened mid-flight. In the cockpit, the pilots felt a sudden shift in air pressure. The plane dipped slightly, then nothing. Cooper had vanished. When they landed safely in Reno, Nevada, hours later, the rear stair was still lowered. Cooper's seat was empty. His tie, a clip-on, was left behind. Along with 2 of the parachutes, the reserves, the FBI swarmed the plane. They fingerprinted every surface. They found 8 Raleigh cigarette butts, a black hair on the seat. The tie had a few partial prints, but the man himself gone. No chute, no body, no trace, just a trail of mystery that would baffle investigators for decades. The clock read 7:40 p.m. The sky outside was bruised and black. Rain streaked against the side of the Boeing 727 like warning scratches from a clawed hand. The wind buffeted the wings. The aircraft, now nearly empty except for the crew and a hijacker with a parachute and $200,000 in cash, was a ticking mystery in the sky. D.B. Cooper stood in the rear of the cabin. Calm, still, focused. Behind the cockpit, flight attendant Tina Mucklow sat in the jump seat. She had seen the money. She had handed Cooper the parachutes. She had watched him remain composed while the FBI scrambled on the ground. Now, she stared down the aisle and wondered, is he really going to jump into the night? He was. Cooper leaned toward her. His voice was steady, even kind. You can go to the cockpit now, Mississippi. She hesitated. You'll be fine. Just close the curtain. He said it like he meant it, not a threat, almost like a goodbye. She stood, turned, and walked. Her mind reeled. Who was this man? Why this flight? Why this plan? She never looked back. The curtain slid shut. And then, just minutes later, the rear stairs were opened mid-flight. A feat considered impossible by most. But D.B. Cooper didn't care about impossible. He embraced it. Somewhere over the dense, cold forests of southwestern Washington, in a storm of 200 miles per hour winds, the man called D.B. Cooper jumped. He disappeared into blackness. With him went the ransom money, the parachute, and every single answer. It was 8:13 p.m. The flight crew felt the plane jolt, like a sudden shift, a gut punch from the sky. They knew what it meant. He was gone. When they landed, law enforcement swarmed the aircraft. The money? Gone. The man? Gone. The only trace he left behind? A black clip-on tie on seat 18E. A clip-on tie, some cigarette butts, and a legend. The greatest disappearing act in American criminal history had just begun. Within hours, a full-scale manhunt launched. The FBI stormed into action. They called it NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. But they didn't have much. No fingerprints. No clear identity. No confirmed eyewitness name. Just that alias, Dan Cooper. Misreported by the media as D.B. Cooper. The search area was vast. Over 18,000 square miles. Mountains, forests, rivers. A wilderness playground for a fugitive. Air Force planes retraced the flight path. Helicopters buzzed treetops. Hundreds of agents combed the forests on foot and horseback. They searched ravines, riverbanks, even deep into the Columbia River Gorge. Nothing. Not a shred. No parachute. No body. No briefcase full of money. It was as if he vanished into thin air. As weeks turned into months, thousands of tips came in. Men bragged about being Cooper in bars. Families suspected quiet uncles. Jilted lovers made accusations. The FBI created a list of over 800 potential suspects. Some were convincing, most were not, but a few stood out, like Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Army demolitions expert who hijacked a plane just 5 months after Cooper, using nearly the same method. He escaped mid-flight with $500,000 and a parachute. He was caught 2 days later, convicted, but the FBI said he wasn't Cooper. Too young, different face, different MO. Then there was Dwayne Weber. On his deathbed, he whispered to his wife, "I'm Dan Cooper." She later found suspicious notebooks, maps, and even a knee injury consistent with a hard parachute landing. Still, no proof. And then there was Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper, airline employee, looked like the sketch, had suspicious cash. His own brother believed he was Cooper. The FBI remained unconvinced, and the case got colder. In 1980, a young boy digging in the sand along the Columbia River made a discovery that reignited the mystery. 3 bundles of cash, rotting, but still wrapped in rubber bands. They totaled $5,800. All had serial numbers matching the Cooper ransom, found 40 miles from the suspected jump zone. But how? Had the money floated downstream? Was it buried by Cooper? Or dropped mid-air? The FBI couldn't say. They searched the area. No more bills. No more clues. Just those rotting stacks of cash. It only deepened the riddle. Cooper had demanded 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve. Why? The theory: he wanted the FBI to believe he might take a hostage with him. That way, they wouldn't sabotage the gear. It worked. But there was a twist. One of the reserve chutes he took was a dummy, used only for training. It was inoperable. If he used that one, he died the moment he pulled the cord. Did Cooper know? Experts argue he must have. The dummy was clearly labeled. But if he didn't, that means his survival chances dropped drastically. Even still, no body, no remains. No proof he died. So the myth lived on. Years passed. Then decades. D.B. Cooper wasn't just a fugitive anymore. He was folklore. Books were written. Movies made. Songs composed. He became a symbol of rebellion, coolness, mystery. A criminal who pulled off the impossible and vanished like smoke. Some saw him as a folk hero. Others called him a master criminal. Everyone had theories. None could prove anything. And with each passing year, the myth only grew. He was everywhere, and nowhere. And the FBI? They were no closer to the truth. In 2016, 45 years after the hijacking, the FBI made a stunning announcement. They were officially closing the D.B. Cooper case. After thousands of interviews, after examining over 60 volumes of evidence, after chasing ghosts across the country, they gave up. The case was now cold. But the public? They weren't done. Amateur sleuths, YouTube creators, ex-cops, and retired agents still pursue leads, still dissect theories, still hunt for Cooper in newspaper archives, family trees, and crash maps. They won't stop, because no one else ever did what he did. He hijacked a Boeing 727, took $200,000 in ransom, and jumped into the freezing wilderness without a trace. And survived? Maybe. Let's rewind. Picture him. A man in a black suit, dark glasses, holding a briefcase full of dynamite. Calm, polite, strategic. He sits in seat 18E, drinking bourbon, watching the clouds. No panic, no outbursts, just patience, waiting for the right moment. Then he moves, not frantically but with precision. Parachute on, door open, wind screaming, no hesitation. One step, and he's gone. Just like that, into the night, into history, into legend, forever. Even now, half a century later, people still ask, did he live? Was he ever caught but never connected? Was he buried somewhere in the Cascades? Or did he change his name, live a quiet life, and smile every time someone said, we'll never know who D.B. Cooper really was? We may never know, but that's why the story still holds us. Because mystery never dies. It only waits. Years turned into decades. The world changed. Planes got faster, security tighter, and criminals smarter, or at least more digital. But D.B. Cooper remained frozen in time, suspended somewhere between folklore and fact, the man who vanished into the clouds and rewrote what it meant to disappear. As the world evolved, so too did the legend, rippling through generations like the sonic boom of a jet overhead. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016. After 45 years of combing through theories, interrogating suspects, analyzing parachute equipment, and reviewing every shred of physical evidence, they boxed it all up and shelved it under unsolved. The press release framed it as a shift in resource allocation. But to Cooper enthusiasts, it felt like a surrender. For some, this closure ignited a fire. Citizen sleuths redoubled their efforts. YouTubers reconstructed the jump frame by frame. Reddit threads ballooned with elaborate theories. Forums emerged dedicated solely to tracking down the man who defied gravity and government. The question wasn't just, who was D.B. Cooper? Anymore. It was, why does this mystery still matter so much? It mattered because Cooper represented something rare. A criminal who broke the rules but didn't break anyone. He terrified a nation, yet he never fired a shot. He hijacked a plane, but he gave the passengers his cigarettes. In an age when villains were either monsters or martyrs, Cooper was a ghost, a gentleman thief who asked for money and vanished with the wind. Books were written, documentaries aired. Even the FBI agents who worked the case started to soften. Some said off the record they admired him. He didn't hurt anyone. He played by his own rules. One agent famously said, "If he's out there and alive, I almost hope he made it." But not everyone romanticized him. For the airline industry, Cooper was the catalyst for sweeping changes. The term skyjacking became more than a headline, it was a crisis. Airport security tightened drastically. The FAA introduced the Cooper vane, a mechanical device that prevented rear staircases from being lowered in flight. Every boarding pass now carried a weight beyond its price. Cooper's act changed the very fabric of how Americans traveled. Still, the myth grew. Sightings popped up in every corner of the country, from truck stops in Oregon to beaches in Florida. Some claimed they knew Cooper. Others swore they were him. Deathbed confessions came and went, but nothing stuck. No DNA matched. No fingerprints aligned. Cooper had become less man and more mirage. Then came the digital age. In 2008, the FBI released never-before-seen documents hoping the internet might crack the case. It backfired, sort of. It didn't produce a name, but it birthed a culture. Online detectives analyzed the tie Cooper left behind with microscopic detail, discovering rare metal particles possibly linking him to aerospace engineering. Some claimed this pointed to Boeing. Others said it was a red herring. In 2020, a new theory emerged from a former military pathfinder named Carl Aronson. He believed Cooper didn't land in the woods at all, but on a logging road picked from a topographic map, timed perfectly to the flight's descent. Aronson even found an old parachute harness buried in a collapsed barn near the flight path. But tests were inconclusive, another dead end. Yet for every new clue, there was a deeper void. The money never resurfaced. Aside from the few deteriorating bills found on the Columbia River, not a cent was spent, banked, or laundered. It was as if Cooper vanished and took the ransom with him into the ether. So where did he go? Some believe Cooper died in the jump, that he overestimated his abilities, missed his mark, and became a skeleton tangled in evergreens. Others are convinced he survived, living out his days in quiet anonymity, perhaps watching the documentaries about himself with a grin. There was the theory that he was a Vietnam vet with nothing left to lose, that he had trained for this moment. The jump wasn't reckless. It was rehearsed. But if that were true, why not do it again? Why only one heist? A more philosophical angle began to take root in recent years. Maybe Cooper wasn't after money. Maybe he wanted to vanish because life itself had become unbearable. The hijacking wasn't a crime, it was a clean break, a final act of self-reinvention. He didn't want to be rich. He wanted to disappear. And maybe, just maybe, he did. In a world addicted to exposure, where every move is tracked, filmed, and uploaded, Cooper became the patron saint of mystery. The man who beat the system not by hacking it, but by stepping out of it entirely. No tweets, no selfies, no fingerprints, just vapor. In 2023, a documentary team claimed they found a military-style boot embedded in a mossy forest outside Ariel, Washington. The GPS coordinates aligned with a possible jump path. Inside the boot, a rusted money clip and a single $20 bill, serial number partially burned. But the lab results were inconclusive. Once again, the mystery deepened. Now, over 50 years later, Cooper is more legend than man. He inspired songs, TV characters, Halloween costumes. He became a symbol not of crime but of escape. In the chaos of the modern world, where every mistake is forever and every identity is traceable, D.B. Cooper remains the last true enigma. Maybe that's why we can't let go. Because Cooper did what none of us can. He slipped the leash, escaped the grid, became a story instead of a statistic. And so, every time a plane hums overhead in the Pacific Northwest, someone looks up. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he lived. Maybe he's watching us search, smiling at the spectacle he created. Or maybe, just maybe, the truth doesn't matter anymore. Because in the end, D.B. Cooper didn't just vanish. He ascended. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.